Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be back with you. I hope you've had lovely weather. We certainly have had up in Scotland all week, and I hope it continues. I wonder if you've ever had the experience where you have people in front of you and you know one of them is lying, but you can't tell which one. Perhaps as a parent, someone has broken something, eaten something, or whatever the case may be, and each of your children look you in the eye and say, "It wasn't me." And you know it has to be one of them, but you can't figure out which one. And you might find yourself saying something like, just tell me the truth now because it'll be better for you and you won't get into much trouble. But if I find out later it was you, I'll be really, really angry. But still, nobody owns up. Sometimes we can look around at the evidence to try to get to the truth. So we look at the chocolate smeared face of the child that says, "No, I didn't eat any chocolate." Or you try to recognize the handwriting on the graffiti on the wall. And sometimes you have to listen to other people who've witnessed things in an effort to piece everything together to get to the truth. It is a very frustrating experience. We may even find ourselves asking God to help us because we just don't know who to believe. On perhaps more of a serious note, maybe you've been a juror in a court case, trying to decide who is guilty and listening to all the evidence before the individual is sentenced or cleared and found innocent. Wouldn't it be great to be able to just know the truth? And then you would know that justice was truly served. But maybe you find yourself on the other side of the situation where you are telling the truth, but you are not being believed. And there's absolutely nothing you can do to prove your innocence. It's just your word. And because people can't read minds, they don't believe you. That can be equally frustrating, especially if you're innocent and you're punished as if you were guilty. It reminds me of a story in the Old Testament in 1 Kings 3, verses 16 to 28. You might remember the story too. It's two women who live together, each have a child, and one morning one of the children is found dead. And they go to King Solomon and they say, each saying that the baby that is alive is theirs. And King Solomon decides that the baby has to be cut in two and that they can each get half. Now, I remember hearing that story as a young girl and I was absolutely horrified at Solomon's solution to this dispute. But of course, what I didn't realise was that Solomon, in his wisdom, knew that the real mother, out of love, would be willing to give up her child rather than have it killed, while the other woman really wouldn't care one way or the other. He was very clever, he certainly was wise, and he found a way to get to the truth of the matter. But you and me, we don't have such wisdom as Solomon. We don't always understand human nature and why people do what they do. And we struggle knowing the truth and knowing what to do in certain situations. In the lectionary scriptures this week, we read about Pilate being in a similar predicament. Now, Pilate was not the most likeable of characters. He was the Roman governor and he was in charge of Judea at the time. He was very unpopular with the Jews because he had raided the temple treasuries for money to build a big aqueduct. He didn't really mind not being liked by the Jews because I don't think he really liked them either. He was concerned about holding on to his power. So when the religious leaders brought Jesus to him, he knew something wasn't right. He knew that lies were being told. Of course, it wasn't just a simple, straightforward case of someone telling lies. There was a lot more going on. And although Pilate in the end knew that Jesus was speaking the truth, he chose to allow the Jewish leaders to have their way, and Jesus was crucified. So he kept the peace so he could keep his power. But we're getting ahead of the story. Let's read about it in John 18, verses 28 to 40. And today I'm reading in the NIV translation. So John 18, verses 28 to 40. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. Now, we might not really understand why that was a big deal, but by Jewish law, entering the house of a Gentile would cause a Jewish person to be ceremonially defiled or unclean, and as a result he could not take part in the worship at the temple or celebrate the festivals until he was restored to a state of cleanliness. So, afraid of being defiled, the Jewish leaders stayed outside the house where they'd taken Jesus. Ironically, when you think about it, they were so fastidious about keeping the ceremonial requirements of their religion, and all the time inside their hearts they were harbouring murder and treachery. Let's carry on with the story in verse 29. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" They replied, "If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourself and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. Aha! Pilate began to sense what was going on. He could see that religious leaders hated Jesus, but he didn't want to act as their executioner. They couldn't sentence Jesus to death themselves. The permission had to come from a Roman leader. So you see, Jesus' life had become a pawn in a political power struggle. Threats and innuendos, lies and half-truths abounded. But let's carry on with the story in verse 32. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. So thinking about that statement, we look back at Matthew 20, verse 19. And Jesus in Matthew had already predicted the manner of his death, and he'd shared that information with his disciples on the way to Jerusalem. It says in verse 19, "And will hand him," so he's talking about the Son of Man, Jesus, "over to the Gentiles," or as we know them, the Romans, "to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day he will be raised to life." And now we find, sadly, that what Jesus had predicted and told his disciples earlier, it was now actually taking place. So let's go back to our story and look at verse 33 to 34. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" Now, I don't know about you, but it seems like Pilate is on the back foot, so to speak. He's the one asking the questions because he's in charge, but instead of answering him, Jesus calmly asks him a question. This must have frustrated Pilate, and he said in verse 35, "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied, "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Now, in his role as Roman governor, Pilate was trying to find out if Jesus was trying to set up a rebel government. This is what he was mostly concerned about. He wanted to know if Jesus was a threat to Pilate and the Roman rule. Now, knowing this, the Jewish leaders, perhaps deliberately, I'm not sure, but perhaps they did, deliberately used the inflammatory word king. After all, they could have a clear conscience because they'd used the word king, and to them they were meaning religious ruler or perhaps Messiah. You know, we often find that in cases of deception, truth is used but twisted in such a way as to have a different meaning and have a different outcome. It was almost as if the Jewish leaders knew what buttons to push or to press with Pilate, and they knew that he would see another king as a threat to his rule. Carrying on in verse 36, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders, but now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. And you get a sense that Pilate's quite frustrated, but now he's thinking, oh, so this man is a king, so he's feeling like he's going to get somewhere. But Jesus answers, "You say I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this, Pilate went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." So you see, Pilate had asked Jesus a straightforward question, and Jesus had answered him calmly and clearly. Despite how it appears, it is Jesus who is really in control here, not Pilate, not the religious leaders. Remember, we read in verse 36, "My servants would fight if I wanted them to." So Jesus knew that he had the power to get out of that situation. Pilate facilitates. He can't make up his mind. He's trying to get out of a difficult situation without losing his power and his control and his job. But he can sense that there's something special about Jesus. He's never seen someone behave in this manner, and it unnerves him. The Jewish leaders, however, responding from a place of hatred and anger, although they thought it was Jesus who was on trial, and on earth he certainly was. They were the ones who really were on trial before God, a much higher authority, in fact, the ultimate authority. They were actually on trial for premeditated murder, and one day they will stand before God and Jesus to answer for their crimes. I wouldn't like to be in their shoes. And you know, that was the true reality of the situation. We as humans don't see the full picture, and we forget or are unaware of what really is going on. Jesus, however, knew the truth. He knew God's plan, and he knew the reason for his trial. And despite the pressure and persecution, he was able to focus on carrying out God's plan, and as a result, he was able to be calm. Remember, he'd already been strengthened by the angel the night before, and that must have really helped him. So we believe that Jesus is a king, but one whose kingdom is not of this world. There seems to have been no question in Pilate's mind that Jesus spoke the truth and was innocent of any of the made-up crimes that the Jewish leaders had said. Let's look again at verse 38. "I find no basis for a charge against him," he continues, "but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now, Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. So who is Barabbas? I'm sure you know this already. Barabbas was a rebel against Rome, and although he had committed murder, he was probably seen as a hero among the Jews. The Jews hated being governed by Rome and paying taxes to the despised government. Barabbas, who had led a rebellion and failed, he was actually released instead of Jesus. But you know, Jesus was the only one who could truly help Israel. The great irony, the great truth, was that Jesus was their only source of help. What he was offering them was true freedom. They just couldn't see it. Now, next week, James Henderson will continue with the story of Jesus' trial on the YouTube premiere. I don't want to steal any of his thunder. It's truly a gripping story, even though as you're reading it, you find your emotions get stirred up by the injustice of it all, and you marvel how Jesus could have been so calm. But in the time that I have left this morning, I would like to take a look again at Jesus' last statement. Take time to look at it in greater depth. Jesus had said to Pilate the reason he had come into the world was to testify to the truth, and that we should listen to him. I read it again in the English Standard Version, and I'll just read it out. It's not on a slide. "But for this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." That makes it just a little bit clearer. So what is Jesus saying? He is saying that he is a messenger of the truth. He had existence and purpose before he was born as a physical human being. His birth was a coming into the world to achieve that purpose, to tell the world the truth. Pilate, I have come to tell you the truth. If you're interested in the truth, then you'll listen to me. But Pilate wasn't listening, was he? Because he sort of contemptuously says, what is truth? Now it would appear that Pilate has doubts about whether anyone tells the truth, whether anyone is credible, and whether such a thing as truth even exists. You know, the Romans and the Greeks liked to debate about the concept of truth. In Pilate's and in the Jewish leaders' world, they played a political game in order to retain their power. To many government officials, truth was whatever the majority of people agreed with, or whatever helped advance their own personal power and political goal. When there is no basis for truth, there is no basis for moral right and wrong. Justice becomes whatever works or whatever helps those in power. And sadly, that's what we're seeing being played out in the Ukraine today. The strong justify taking from the weak. Leaders and politicians want power and wealth, and they skew the truth, their version of the truth, to justify what they're doing. Lies are told with clear conscience. And we've watched the news and we can see that Russian people are being fed lies about what Putin is actually doing. There is a popular thought today that truth is a relative concept. There is no such thing as truth or absolute truth. We all have different truths, and your truth is your truth and my truth is mine. We shouldn't judge each other. You've probably heard it said, there's your side of the story, my side of the story, and maybe the truth is somewhere in between. I'm not sure about you, but as a Christian, we believe Jesus came to bear witness to the truth. We believe there is such a thing as absolute truth. Back in the Garden of Eden, Satan, who is the father of lies, deceived Satan. He said, you can be like God and decide for yourself what is good and what is evil, what is true and what it isn't. You know, God is keeping something that's good from you. Eve could see with her own eyes that the fruit looked fresh and delicious. And then she probably thought, isn't it a good thing that I want to be wise? You see, Satan was clever. He was mixing the truth in with something that was good. He was mixing the truth in and he was adding lies to make it more difficult to spot. See, a straightforward lie is easier to see, but when there's truth mixed in, it's so difficult. It's a subtle thing. And sometimes when we look at the physical, like Eve did, she looked at the fruit and it looked fresh and delicious. We can misjudge the whole situation. We don't really know what's going on. Eve didn't really know what was going on. You know, that account in Genesis was the first recorded lie, and Satan has been deceiving and lying to people ever since. And without God, we cannot see the true reality. But truth is far more than just a moral guide. Let's turn to John chapter 14, verse 6. Jesus declared, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Jesus didn't say he would show the truth or teach the truth or model the truth. He is the truth. Truth personified. He is the source of all truth, the embodiment of truth, and therefore the reference point for evaluating everything. The Bible tells us that as followers of Christ, we are to live in the truth. When we look at 3 John chapter 1 verse 3, it says, you are living according to the truth. So as Christians, we live according to the truth. And as followers of Christ, we are to love and believe the truth. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 10, he, speaking about Satan, will use every kind of evil deception to fool those on their way to destruction because they refuse to love and accept the truth that would save them. We can see evidence of this in the world today. You know, people are deceived and we're on our way to destruction. because we refuse to love and accept the truth that would actually save us. As followers of Christ, we are to speak the truth in love. Let's look at Ephesians 4 verse 15. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. So we've to speak the truth in love. You see, God values speaking the truth. The world seems to be saying it's okay to tell lies. They're white lies. They don't really matter. They don't hurt anyone. And, by lying or twisting the truth, you can get what you want. But that's not what God says. We have to speak the truth. The truth is rooted in the eternal God who's all-powerful and unchangeable. In John chapter 17, verse 17, Jesus prayed, "Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth." Truth is more than facts. It's not just something we act upon. It acts upon us. Have you ever thought about that? Truth acts upon us. We can't change the truth, but the truth can change us, and we can base our life on it and live from that vantage point. The truth sanctifies us and sets us apart from the lies that are woven into our sin natures. As Christ, the living word, is truth, so his written word is truth. Though heaven and earth will pass away, God's truth never will. So you see, we can believe in the Bible. Over half the New Testament uses of the word truth, and I'll spell it for you, Aletheia, aletheia, are in John's Gospel. Satan works very hard to hide the truth, but here John is emphasizing the importance of it. He uses that word a lot. You see, truth is reality. It's the true reality. It's the way things really are. What seems to be and what really is are often not the same. Things are not always as they appear. To know the truth is to see things accurately. To believe what isn't true is actually to be blind. We were created to be like God, and as he is truth, our hearts long for truth. It's in our DNA. We really want to hear the truth because God has written his truth on human hearts, in our consciences. It says so in Romans chapter 2 verse 15. Sometimes we get that twinge of shame and the guilt reaches our conscience. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from our recognition that the truth has been violated. But something, if we continue to ignore the truth, if we continue to tell lies or shade the truth, our conscience gets seared and it no longer gives us those feelings of guilt and shame. When the world hears the truth, if spoken graciously, many are drawn to it by the moral vacuum that they feel. There was something about what Jesus said that drew Pilate. He was drawn to Jesus. There was something special that was going on there. Just as God is love and cannot act outside the bounds of love, he is also truth. And he never acts in an untruthful way. That means we can totally rely on him. He is faithful. There will never be a time when we will look and say, "Oh, God lied to us. That wasn't true." Absolutely not. Going back to our original scenario where we're facing people just like Pilate was and someone is lying, we're lucky. We know that we can turn to God and ask him for help. Ask him to help us discern the truth. And then, unlike Pilate, we have to have the courage to act on the truth. We have to be able to live in the truth. Well, it's been lovely being with you this morning. I hope you have a good rest of the week. Remember that we've got the Bible study this coming Wednesday and hope to see you all there. If you want to close your eyes, I'll say a quick prayer. Loving Father, this world can be so confusing, and we as human beings can't decide what is truth and what is a lie. But we know, Father, that you are the truth. And when we look to you, you will guide us in all aspects of our life into that truth. We can place our complete trust on you, Father. We can base our lives on what you have told us. Father, thank you so much for giving us Jesus Christ. And as we lead up to Easter and the crucifixion, help us to think more on what happened to him, the words that he said. Help us to meditate on them and help them to mean something, to impact our lives. Father, and then help us to be rededicated to living our lives in the truth, speaking the truth, following our elder brother Jesus Christ. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for being there, for loving us and for caring for us, Father. And we ask all of this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.